So I'm a couple days late, but I finally got around to finishing The Rings of Power. How I feel about this show, it's very conflicting. When you look all across the internet, it is littered with just a bunch of review bombing. And now, whether or not it is accurate, that's a conversation on its own. But clearly, a lot of people don't like this show. After 8 episodes, which is nearly 8 weeks of this show having been released, you do see more and more people coming to the defense of this show. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, they're not true Tolkien fans, but that's not true. I do see a lot of fans true to the source material who do like this show. First of all, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I am a die-hard Tolkien fan. Do I respect the man? Absolutely. I love that he was capable of giving the world Middle-earth. I love that today we have Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Even though I know The Hobbit is well hated by a lot of people, I still enjoy it. And I am very happy that we get to live in a world where a company like Amazon, I know people, you know what we say about Amazon, but I'm very happy that we live in a world where we could get a TV show from Middle-earth. Do I know everything about Middle-earth and what Tolkien has wrote about this entire series? No, I don't. I mean, one of my favorite video games of all time is Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, even though they're not canon to the books of Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth in general. I still love it. I wish it was canon, to be honest, but it makes sense why it's not. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know everything about this. Even with how much I know, Tolkien has wrote so many things in the Middle-earth saga that my knowledge would possibly be below amateur. When I say there's something I didn't like about this show, I'm saying it because I felt it and I'm being honest. It's not because I want to jump the bandwagon on hating it, because there are things I did enjoy too. And if there is any really hardcore Tolkien fan watching this video right now who of course knows more than me, let me know in the comments below if I am wrong so I can be educated on that matter. Overall, I felt this show is beautiful. I don't think there's any denying that. Everywhere from costume design to set pieces to the world around them, statues, cities, villages, mountains, all of that is beautiful. And I mean, I would hope so. This show did cost over $600 million to make. It is the most expensive TV show ever created. But even though with how beautiful the show is, I don't feel like there's any substance to it. I feel like you are just watching a very pretty show with a couple of really good moments, but at the end of the day, you will never have a Lord of the Rings moment. Lord of the Rings was filled with so many memorable moments, from battles between human elves and orcs, from emotional scenes between Sam and Frodo, from Gandalf fighting a Nazgul. A lot of Lord of the Rings is memorable and gets you emotional. The Rings of Power, I did not feel that. The show is far too convenient. Characters meet other very important characters out of the blue. Items are found in very specific situations and areas at very specific moments where you kind of feel like, oh, isn't that convenient? It just happens to be right there. And moments and plot points intertwine with one another. That makes it feel like screenwriting 101. If I was a 17, 18-year-old guy in college writing my first script ever, and I've never written a script before in my life, it would be a script that I could look at and say, yo, I did a really good job on this. But as time goes forward, I would look at it and be like, everything just lined up too conveniently. There needs to be more drive for characters. There needs to be more reason. There needs to be more mystery. And this is what the show felt like. It felt like all of that never happened. When it comes to the characters and the acting, I do feel like it is very 50-50. Starting with the characters I do like, and I actually don't think this needs to be discussed long, because I think the characters I do like are generally liked by everyone. I really loved the character of Arondir. He is basically the Legolas of the Rings of Power, but his courage and chivalry really put him separated from the rest of the cast and characters. It really made him stand out. Robert Arameo as Elrond, and a lot of you will recognize him as Ned Stark, the young version of him in Game of Thrones. I know a lot of people were iffy on him being casted as Elrond, but I gotta be honest with you, I absolutely love the direction they took with that character. Even though his parts in the show were not over the top, they weren't anything special or crazy, just himself was enough for me to be interested. And also too, Prince Durin and his wife Princess Disa, they were fantastic characters. Their chemistry on screen was always fun, and it was always exciting to see them when they showed up. I cannot wait to see more of them in season 2. I also didn't mind the stranger. I overall enjoyed his story. I could tell from a mile away that was Gandalf, even though from my knowledge Gandalf doesn't show up until the third age and this is the second age, unless that's information that has been misread to me. Maybe he does show up in the second age. I know there actually has been some debate about that, but sticking on the premise that he does come in the third age, that's okay with me. I don't mind that change. Even the Harfoots that he ends up befriending, which are essentially just, ancient hobbits, those characters are great because it does show the friendship that Gandalf does create with those people, and you can even see it in this season as well. Now look, by the end of the season, they don't end up calling him Gandalf, they just call him Wizard, and that's completely understandable. I wonder if this is just simply the fact that Amazon is still trying to play a little coy and be like, is it Gandalf or is it one of the blue? Like, I understand what they're trying to go for if that's the case. Although, with that being said, it's 100% Gandalf, and you can see it in his actions, the way he looks, the things he says. I mean, they got a pretty good actor to portray a younger version of Gandalf. I really love what they did there. And then Charlie Vickers as Halbrand, I think overall he's a very good actor and the character is decent, but it suffers from a lot of very, very poor writing. Now, looking at the characters I don't like, I'm sorry, I gotta start with the biggest one, Galadriel. I think Morfydd Clark's portrayal of Galadriel is insufferable. I think she is so boring and a little mind-numbing to watch. She is so lifeless and only knows one emotion and expression. And honestly, there are times in this show where I swear I don't know if I should be rooting for her or against her, because sometimes she acts like the evil one. If this was a show on its own that had no connection to Lord of the Rings, I would be waiting for her to get killed off in the show. And then I immediately remember, oh yeah, that's right, she's Galadriel. That can't happen. I do really hope her character changes for the better in season 2. Then Charles Edwards as Celebrimbor. I like the character of Celebrimbor, and mainly I like him because of the Shadow of Mordor and War Games. And I know that's not technically canon, as I said before. I gotta be honest with you though, and this is no negativity towards Charles Edwards, because I think he's done fantastic with what he has been given, but that's not the Celebrimbor I know and am really excited to see on screen. I just don't care about his character whenever he shows up. And then the Queen Regent, her father king, and the entire Numenor story, I do not care. I don't care about that entire series of stories. I did not care when they were on screen. I was bored the entire time. I did not care for the acting. That is the biggest downfall of the show for me, and unfortunately nearly half of this season literally takes place on their island, and I just could not care less. The only characters we should be caring about from Numenor is Elendil and his son Isildur. But even in saying that, in the final couple episodes, I was losing interest in Elendil completely. I just did not care anymore. This is how I feel about Tolkien's work and the Middle-earth series as a whole. I could tell you 2 + 2 is 4. You have your question and you have your answer. But the more you look at Tolkien's writings, you end up finding that another question to that first question is, what is 1 + 1? And the answer is 2. So now you have a previous question to that original question, which gives you an answer to that original answer. Then once you keep reading more of Tolkien's work, you start to realize, oh, what's 0.5 plus 0.5? Well, it's 1. So then that's how 1 + 1 = 2, and then 2 + 2 = 4. And it just keeps trickling down more and more. There is always a smaller question and answer that leads up to one big question and answer. And I feel like within his stories, you may know one thing, but even within that one thing, you didn't know about all the other 6 things that morphed into that one thing. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's so stupid that the stranger is Gandalf. Well, I don't know. Maybe that is what happens, or a variation of what happens. Oh, it's so stupid that Halbrand is Sauron. I'll be quite honest with you, I was a little let down the way they revealed who Sauron is. I don't think it should have been done that way. I think Halbrand should have been a friend to the entire company of people who were building these rings, so that at the end of the day, he could slip through and be like, haha, I got the one ring, you all serve me now. Now, I don't exactly know if that is how it happens in Tolkien's writings, but just from a writing perspective, if I was given a broad outline of what is supposed to happen with the rings, that is what I would have done. I now find it very weird and very confusing that Sauron essentially gives up his entire plan to Galadriel and then flees to Mordor, and then Galadriel's answer to fighting off Sauron is to create the exact element that Sauron wants to create to rule Middle-earth. I just don't understand that. The convenience of the show was so profound. Galadriel does not return back to her elven home. She jumps in the ocean, conveniently finds Halbrand. As they're trekking through this massive ocean storm, they conveniently find Elendil. They go back to Numenor, where Galadriel can conveniently commission a massive army to help her in Middle-earth. Arondir ends up finding out that Theo has this ancient blood sword of Sauron, and conveniently the tower base they were hiding out in had a statue of Sauron. Arondir and the rest of the southern villagers who were getting attacked and were basically going to get killed by Adar and the orcs, they were conveniently saved by the convenient timing of Galadriel, Halbrand, and the Númenóreans. And there are just so many things that don't make sense either. Does Adar know Halbrand is Sauron in disguise? Is Halbrand creating these stories to make himself seem like a good man and a better person in the eyes of Galadriel? We all know Halbrand's goal was to eventually get to Celebrimbor to craft these rings for power, but In the earlier episodes when they were in Numenor and Galadriel was convincing Halbrand not to stay as a blacksmith either, but to join up in arms and take the Southlands back for himself, the rightful king of the Southlands, it's not like he denied doing that in front of Galadriel to prove to her that this is a man who needs help to know who he is, to get back to Middle-earth, to rule Middle-earth as the rightful human king. Halbrand literally had moments in those episodes where he was sitting alone, contemplating if he wanted to go back to Middle-earth. He's Sauron, though. Why should he need to convince himself to go back to Middle-earth? His one and only goal is to take over Middle-earth, destroy everything, and have an army of orcs rise above it. That's his only goal. So I don't understand why for the on-screen viewer such as us, they were trying to prove to us that Halbrand was considering his options. The only thing he wants is to destroy Middle-earth. So there's just a lot of things I'm confused about there. How about these three ladies in the final couple of episodes who were looking for the stranger because they thought he was Sauron? Who in the world were they, and how did they have the powers that they had? They had like shape-shifting, immunity to fire. They could even like control and appear fire out of nowhere. Even the really weird looking bald elf one, she could like force push and levitate and stuff like that, like doing things that Gandalf and Saruman could never even do. The representation of their characters, what they did on screen, literally made no sense to me. It was just a plot device to show you he's Gandalf. It was so poorly written. It still mind blows me that in a $600 million budget, they let that slide. Then we even go back to Numenor where we end up finding the king died. Who cares? Not even the fact that I don't care about Numenor or the characters there, but we know nothing about this king. He was just literally a mad king who was sick and diseased, who had ramblings that didn't even lead anywhere, at least not this season. But if we're not even gonna get a taste of it this season, why even introduce that? And then at the end of the final episode, when the credits roll, we have a song describing the Dark Lord and the powers of the ring, which, by the way, I actually really liked the song. I thought it was great, but it's describing what the One Ring can do to all the other rings. How is that possible when Sauron hasn't even crafted the One Ring? I thought if Sauron wanted all the rings bound to the One Ring, he would have needed the One Ring created by now, but he doesn't even have Mithril. So if he doesn't have Mithril, how's he gonna create the ring? And now they know Halbrand is Sauron. They know his identity. And I know he can take many forms. Maybe he'll look different in the next season. I highly doubt it because I think they're going to want to make good use of Charlie Vickers. Just taking that into consideration, what's the goal from here? Like, how are they going to get around this hump? The song even says he is the Dark Lord in Mordor. How can he be the Dark Lord when he doesn't have the ring, but also he doesn't even know it's called Mordor? The only person who knows it's called Mordor is Adar. And by the way, what a terrible decision in the 7th episode to show the stupid PowerPoint transition of the Southlands burn out Mordor. Come on. Come on, $600 million. Overall, what I am now looking for in season 2 is a lot of questions to some of these answers, which I actually don't think we ever will get answers because a lot of these questions are far too convenient and it feels like the answers they created came to them as they made the show. I was thinking to myself, who are the human kings and the dwarven kings who we're going to get these rings. We have barely been introduced to anyone of that status. I don't even know if we're going to get to that point. I was thinking Halbrand was going to be the Witch King of Angmar. That would make the most sense. Where does that go from here now? Or even the fact that in the bottom of the Dwarven Mountain, they show Morgoth. And it just feels like they showed Morgoth just to show Morgoth. Like, is there a plan there? Did you just want us to know he's living down deep in that mountain? Okay. Overall, I have a lot more negativity towards the show than I do positivity, but weirdly enough, I still don't think the show is terrible. I do think there is a lot to be liked here. I'm going to give the first season of The Rings of Power a 6 out of 10. There are things about the show that do still feel like Lord of the Rings. It still does feel like Middle-earth, disregarding poorly written dialogue and the poorly written and convenient storyline and script writing. There is something to be admired about within this show. Do I think it's memorable? No, not really. I think the only thing that's going to drive its memory is the fact that it is connected to Tolkien's work. It is connected to Lord of the Rings. But anyways, guys, I've talked quite long, and I want to know what you thought about this show if you've watched it. And once again, if you are a diehard Lord of the Rings fan, if you are a diehard Tolkien fan, let me know in the comments below how right I am about things, or maybe how wrong I am. Or maybe just explain to me why some things are depicted the way they are, because I would like to understand it. Whereas I do have a fair share of knowledge in this world, I am nowhere near as diversive in Tolkien's knowledge as other people are. So if you're here, feel free to let me know. But anyways, everyone, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and we will see how season 2 ends up being, which I assume will come out next year or the year after. So until next time, everyone, I will talk to you all very soon.